Hello and welcome to PastCast, or the PastCast, whatever this is going to be called. This is basically a podcast format sort of show that I'm going to be doing that is all about paleontology, prehistory, and just all the topics related to our planet's past. And as you can tell, there's also a strange emerging pattern related to words that start with P. Even pattern fits in. It's a conspiracy. Anyhow, I just recorded the entire pilot episode for this on the wrong microphone. I recorded it through my webcam because for some ungodly reason, Audacity decided that should be the device that it defaults to. So anyhow, I'm literally just redoing this, and I can't believe this is happening. But hey, it'll be even better this time. So, a couple things to get out of the way before we get too deep into this. We're gonna discuss professionality in a bit. But before that, a little just sort of channel-related disclaimer. I have a few more #HowISafari reviews coming up quite soon. I actually have the Elasmosaurus and the Dimorphodon sitting on my desk over here just to remind me that, they exist and I need to talk about them next. And then after those, I will review the Shringosaurus and the Spinosaurus. I've been putting those ones off because the Spinosaurus, there's just a lot to talk about, a lot of details and controversies even to cover. And then the Shringosaurus, mine has an interesting quality control error that you may be aware of if you saw the unboxing for that one. So they're both just a little bit more tricky to talk about than some things. So yeah, anyhow, that's about it with that. Getting back to what I mentioned that we would be talking about, professionality. The last time that I started a series that was in any way similar to this or to the general podcasting format, it basically self-imploded, crashed and burned completely, directly as a result of my obsession with professionality, making it as professional and as slick as possible. And so for this series, I really want to very intentionally go the opposite direction. This is going to be very relaxed. It's going to be all about just audience interaction and just kind of chilling out for an hour or two, or however long these episodes end up being. This one's going to be about an hour, but they might be a lot longer in the future, especially if I get guests on and such. So, anyhow, there you go. There's that. And the other thing with professionality is, obviously, I'm going for a decent level of general production quality here with the general audio quality and such, but I'm not going to be, quite as strict on, for instance, what background noise gets let in through the mic, what gets picked up, rather, let in. What am I even describing? Is my brain broken? Anyhow, as far as background noise getting picked up and stuff, if a car goes by, if there's some yelling outside, if another person in this house makes some noise downstairs, whatever, I'm not going to be too worried about cutting it all out and making sure you don't get any of that. So just be prepared for all sorts of things, I guess. Obviously, if there's a deafening roar of a plane going by, I'll cut that out. And I am somewhat close to both, I forget what it's called, Fort something, a military base, and also an airport kind of north of me, up near Seattle. And so I'm sort of right in the path of a couple of flight patterns. And so some loud planes, that's not out of the question. There's also been a lot of helicopters lately for some reason. It's mildly unnerving. But yeah, anyhow, so if you're looking for content that's more pro and more structured, then this probably isn't for you. But if, for whatever reason, you find the idea of me just loosely rambling for an hour appealing, then welcome. You've found the perfect form of content. Anyhow, yeah. So, for this one, to actually get into what we're going to be talking about in this first pilot episode, obviously this is a pilot, or an episode 0, as it were. It's not properly episode 1 yet. And that's just because I don't exactly know what I'm going to learn from this one. I really want all of your feedback on what I'm doing here and kind of what everyone thinks of it, so that I can change things for the better. So this is an experiment. This episode is for the purposes of just learning and just jumping in and getting started. So anyhow, for this one, we're actually going to be, instead of answering like questions that are like brand new, we're going to be answering questions from 11 months ago. 11 months ago, I made a post on my community tab. Okay, I found the browser tab. I'm a genius. Anyhow, it reads, "Hey y'all, I'm planning on doing a straight up Q&A/AMA type video at some point soon. I'm looking for questions that will actually prompt some discussion and not just a quick, easy answer. Only the best questions will be picked. So don't hesitate, ask me things. In all caps, ask me things." Anyhow, I never made that video. You can search for it all you want, but surprise, surprise, it doesn't exist. I don't remember exactly why it got like delayed and pushed off initially, but I know that not too long after that, Kappa and all that sort of happened and the YouTube apocalypse descended upon me. And that was surely a motivator in not really wanting to, make a nice lighthearted Q&A. So anyhow, yeah, long story short, that video never happened, but it's happening now. We're making it a part of PastCast. Hell yeah. Anyhow, first question comes from Digaunt Dash, and this is a really good one. He asks, have you ever planned on making a series or a movie that would have been a pure documentary based on a real formation? Presumably he means, a geologic formation with fossils and such that indicate the specific flora and fauna of an area and a specific time. The answer, well, actually, before I answer how I feel about this now, I've technically already done this, and Digaunt should know this because he was a part of the communal channel of Prehistoric Central. This channel died so quickly and so brutally, so permanently. No one probably even remembers it, but me, Digaunt, Matthew, Cameron, and Kyle all tried to start this like community channel where we were gonna kind of do other like side projects together, and it just turned into a big nothing. But I'm actually now remembering, I want to say that Digaunt's project was straight up a reboot or a sequel of Prehistoric Park. That's pretty epic and hilarious all at once, looking back on it. But anyhow, I had a series on there called Prehistoric Snapshot. I almost just said Prehistoric Central again. It was called Prehistoric Snapshot, and it was kind of like Jurassic Fight Club. It was like these shorts of just like a couple animals in a specific ecosystem in combat, having some sort of conflict and seeing who emerges the victor. And it didn't go anywhere. I made one episode and stopped after that, and it wasn't terribly well received, if I remember correctly, and for good reason, because it was not very well put together. There was no research involved, no scientific legitimacy, and for something that was intended to be more accurate and more educational than what I had done in the past, which is more straight up science fiction, it just didn't work at all, basically. So that project was a complete dead end. I just didn't approach it from the right direction. I liked the concept at the time of this more accurate, more educational thing, but I just didn't have the commitment, clearly, to actually make it scientifically accurate. It's a little sad looking at it in hindsight, but it was a thing, very briefly. But anyhow, to answer the question of, how do I feel about this currently? Like, would I do something like that now? The answer is a complicated one. I mean, conceptually, I love this idea. This is a fantastic concept. The idea of actually utilizing my resources and my various mediums to put together some kind of scientifically legitimate, paleontologically legitimate documentary about prehistoric life sounds fantastic, sounds incredible, sounds like a great opportunity to do a lot of things. But the problem is just the amount of work and time associated with such a project. If there's one thing I've learned and am currently learning with some of the larger scale film and YouTube related projects that I'm currently trying to tackle, it's that, especially when it comes to editing, taking on giant artistic projects on my own is just profoundly impractical. And so if I were to ever do something like what Degaunt is sort of suggesting, as awesome as that would be, I think there's no way I would ever do it as just an independent YouTube thing. We would need a budget and we'd need a team. And not to say that you'd need, a ton of people, but I'd need at least a couple other people helping me and some kind of actual financial base for this project, I think. Especially, not only would this be probably the biggest thing I had tackled, filmmaking-wise, but you're adding on to that this new level of research and scientific sort of pressure that would definitely up the general difficulty of putting that together. So, very cool idea. Short answer is yes, I would consider it, but will it ever happen? Probably not. Okay, so next question. That was Degaunt Dash's question. Next up, we have a comment from Dinoxels with a bunch of questions attached, and he just says, pick which ones you want to answer, so I'm just going to answer a few of them. First up, are you into speculative evolution / biology? Absolutely. Speculative evolution and speculative biology are fascinating topics, and the creative potential of them, in my opinion, has hardly even been tapped yet. There's so much you can do with speculative biology and with speculating on how certain creatures may evolve under certain, evolutionary pressures. It's really, really interesting to talk about. I can think of some great examples off the top of my head of how the creative potential has already been tapped. Like, for instance, Wayne Barlow. The man is incredible. He is responsible for the creation of the fictional alien world, the speculative alien planet Darwin 4. There was a book that he wrote called Expedition, and then they adapted that into a documentary. I think it was on either Discovery or Sci-Fi or one of those, called Alien Planet, appropriately enough. And his designs, his scientific considerations for ecological niches, for anatomy, I just love it. I can't get enough of his work. He is just kind of a master at putting together speculative biological designs of organisms that do not exist in the real world. And yeah, he's made an incredibly fleshed out, authentic, believable alien world. And I like the book a lot more than the documentary, actually. I know that's kind of a cliche to say that, oh, I prefer the book to the whatever, media adaptation of it, whether that be a show or a movie or a documentary or what have you. But it really, purely just the artistic style is the visuals of the documentary are good, but the visuals on the book, just the atmosphere and the style is so just, I don't know, it really captures something. And as well, there's just a lot of designs that were not included in the show. The book dives a lot more heavily into tripodal organisms, and it also, oh my god, there's this one thing. There's so much. Oh, now I've thought of two things. First of all, there's this giant swamp creature. I don't remember what it's called. I don't actually own a copy of this book. I've just rented copies before. It's actually a tragedy. But anyhow, there's this giant swamp creature that's basically just a sedentary mouth. And it actually disguises itself as a cave and waits for prey to wander into the cave, looking for food or whatever, and then swallows and digests them. It's brilliant and amazing. And the other thing I just thought of was this one insane mode of reproduction. I think they're called seabacks. They're these coastal big red things that are not in the documentary. This is another book exclusive design of a creature. The females, I believe it is, will bury themselves completely in the sand on the coast with just their sex organs sticking out of the sand, which sounds like a hilarious visual, and it somewhat is. And then the male will come along, mate with them, very awkwardly leaning over, and then I don't remember if the female actually survives and emerges, or if the female dies after laying eggs or giving birth or whatever it is, but then the babies emerge from the sand and stuff. And anyhow, it's very bizarre. I would need to reread it to get into more specifics of how that works, but it's really, really cool. I love the dagger wrist just as an alien design. It's also cool that one difference between the book and the documentary I'm remembering is that the documentary, there's no people. It's an unmanned mission. The things looking at the aliens and capturing data are drones of a sort. They're these unmanned sort of ships or rovers, I guess. And then in the book, you actually have a person. It's a manned mission, and there's a person in like a little like cone-shaped ship, and even the ship design is like scientifically like legitimate and plausible, and it's really cool. Anyhow, there's some other great speculative evolution stuff, specifically with aliens. I feel like my favorite stuff with speculative biology is like one of two extremes. Either really, really subtle, small-scale usages of it when reconstructing prehistoric life, or like full-on sandbox playground, alien world, you can do anything you want. There's not a whole lot in between that really interests me, but there are some cool things, like for instance, like, you know, speculating on the future of Earth evolution and stuff of certain creatures. We'll get to that. But there's some other cool alien stuff I want to mention. You also have Sniad, which is C.M. Kozman's fictional alien world that he's worked on for a while. I think it's C.M. Kozman. And that one it's another like very scientifically well thought out, very plausible alien world with some incredibly detailed taxonomy and just some really cool stuff to look into. You also have the Blue Moon, I think it's called, which I don't think there's a book or a whole bigger project related to this. It was just a documentary. Not quite as fleshed out or as well done as Sniad or Darwin 4, but still kind of cool. There's like weird like floating things in like a low gravity atmosphere that are really big, and like smaller stuff lives on top of them. Oh, and that reminds me of another thing from Alien Planet 2, which if you're familiar with Alien Planet or Expedition at all, you've probably seen the Grove back, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, despite it being one of the more iconic things from that property. It's basically this giant creature that, it's technically, well, I'm trying to think if it would be a biped or a triped. I think technically it's tripodal because it only has two moving limbs, but then it has a skid, an immobile skid in the back that just sort of drags along the ground and allows it to balance. So it technically has 3 points of contact, even though it only has two limbs that it uses to move. But anyhow, it's this giant, like, herbivore that buries itself in the ground for long periods of time for like hibernation, and like trees and stuff will literally start growing on its back, hence the name. And then it like emerges out of the earth and starts lumbering around in the documentary, and it's very epic, and there's trees like waving on its back, and it's pretty great. Sort of ecologically equivalent to like a giant sauropod or something, I guess, although anatomically it's highly dissimilar to a sauropod, but it's a very cool thing. But anyhow, I mentioned earlier that another cool sort of opportunity for speculative stuff is with the future of Earth and our own animal groups and ecology and such. And a great sort of example of some really unique creative ideas with future Earth evolution is, of course, The Future is Wild, which is probably the most well-known of like all these things that I've mentioned. And it has multiple episodes. It starts out like 5 million years, then 20, then goes all the way to like 500 million years or something really crazy. One of my favorite parts of it is just that it shows the slow move onto land of cephalopods, and by the end, there's like cephalopods that have essentially taken up primate niches in a forest ecosystem, and it is very cool. I really love cephalopods, and I really hope that The Future is Wild's predictions, as they were, are correct, and that one day they become dominant land dwellers. I think that would be epic. So anyhow, that's some really cool stuff. I've spent a really long time on this question. I'm okay with that. In fact, I like spending a long time on questions. I think that's good. I don't just want to answer a bunch of questions quickly. I want to actually get into some good discussion. But anyhow, we probably should move on to the next one. All right, so the next question from Dinoxels is, the way he worded this just makes me laugh. What has walking with dinosaurs done to your life? It's just so dramatic. It's like, what has walking with dinosaurs done to your sad, pathetic existence? I don't know. I think the reason it's funny is because it's actually kind of appropriate to ask this question somewhat dramatically because, well, I mean, long story short, Walking with Dinosaurs has had a legitimately dramatic effect on my existence. It was a huge influence in me, becoming interested in dinosaurs and becoming passionate about prehistory, paleontology, and such early in life. I think I probably saw it around age 5 or 6, and I just loved it. I mean, I watched it constantly. I watched that, Walking with Beast, Walking with Monsters, Walking with, it actually didn't have Walking with in the title, but the Allosaurus, the Big Owl, Ballad of Big Owl, whatever it's called. And, that is still probably my favorite, documentary material there is covering the topic of prehistoric life. I really think that no other series has really come close to just capturing a certain richness and authenticity to the ecology and the organisms. There's just something about it. It's from the designs to the camera work. I mean, the designs are admittedly one of the most dated things about these, but they're still like the way they're executed, the way the effects are executed is still like, it still really holds up pretty well for the most part from like an effects standpoint, especially a lot of the animatronics. And so when it comes to like that, when it comes to the camera work and the way it's put together so authentically like a real nature documentary, some of the like the details of the world building, a lot of these little, this comes back to speculative biology actually, because there's a lot of great little pieces of speculative like anatomy or behavior put in here. It just, the world building feels so detailed and so fleshed out in the Walking With stuff, and I've just never watched any sort of documentary that does a better job at like truly immersing me in these prehistoric worlds and making them feel so tangible and so complete. There's other documentaries I really love. When Dinosaurs Roamed America is an obvious pick. I also like Dinosaur Revolution, Planet Dinosaur. There's a few I can think of that are good, but the only one that I like love with a passion is just all that early BBC stuff. Walking with Dinosaurs all the way up to Chased by Dinosaurs, Prehistoric Park, and all that. I just love it. And Walking with Dinosaurs is probably still my favorite one out of the whole group, although, man, Walking with Beasts is an incredibly close second. I don't know what to say. There's just something about even down to, like, the random detail of, like, the Postosuchus marking its territory with urine, which there's no direct evidence of that. Like, there's stuff that they added in there where there's not necessarily direct data that like points to that being a thing, but it's still plausible, and adding in that little detail just makes it feel richer and more believable because it's not so like clinical and detached as something like Planet Dinosaur is, for instance. I actually, Dinosaur Revolution, to give that documentary some credit, it has some cool stuff like that, like the Rahunavis mimicking other organisms' sounds and stuff. That's really cool. But I mean, yeah, like there's no direct evidence, getting back to Walking With, of like an egg tube or of the migrational behaviors of Ornithochirus. But just adding those things really helps to flesh out the world building and to flesh out the authenticity, the believability of all of it. And yeah, I don't know. It definitely, I mean, not only did Walking With Dinosaurs really influence like the degree of passion and interest I hold for prehistoric life, but I think it also did a quite a significant amount of work in sort of me developing certain preferences in how I like to see prehistoric life constructed. Because I have no tolerance for things being changed or added with reconstructions for sake of just making something cooler. I think that's boring and stupid. And Walking With Dinosaurs definitely did a great job of showing me early on that, not changing, but adding certain things to an organism's anatomy or behavior that are plausible and are there for the sake of, the interesting consequences they may have, or just for the sake of them having a certain amount of sort of base in the real world, like a certain amount of plausibility because of them existing on certain modern organisms. That's great. Like, you can add things to your reconstructions that aren't directly, pointed to by evidence in the fossil material, but you have to do it in a way that's scientifically legitimate and in a way that's interesting, in my opinion. And Walking With Dinosaurs just does such a fantastic job at that. At exactly that. So anyhow, that's That's the answer to the walking with question. Let's see. What tyrannosaur, this is another one from Dinoxels, what tyrannosaur that's not Alberto, T-Rex, etc., would you like to see from Doug Watson's thick, with 2 C's, sculpts? So this is kind of a funny question, because since he wrote this, Safari and Doug have manufactured and produced their Chiansaurus, which is very much not thick. It's a very gracile, accurately proportioned theropod and tyrannosaur. And so taking that into account, my answer is a little different. But if I were to have answered this question back when Dinoxels wrote it, I probably would have said I don't really want to see more tyrannosaurs. I just want Doug to stick to what he's good at, which is ceratopsids, mammals, sauropods. Of course, the Safari Feathered Rex is pretty great, but I think in general, when it comes especially to proportional issues and issues of things being too heavily built, Doug definitely seems to have a weakness with theropods sometimes. And don't get me wrong, that still rings true more than ever, in fact, with the 2020 lineup of models from Safari, because this is the year that we got the Deinonychus and the Dilophosaurus and the Concavenator, and those are some of the worst theropods they've ever done. Sorry, that's just my opinion. I could totally rant about this, but I won't. But the Chiansaurus is undeniably a really great figure. It has the teeth thing that some people don't really like, and I understand why. But proportionally and anatomically, overall, it's really well put together. So keeping that in mind, and assuming that more Tyrannosaurs from Doug would be on the same level of quality as the Chiansaurus, I would love to see more. It's a shame that Dinoxels here excluded Alberto and T-Rex, because those are 2 of the first ones I would want. A new T-Rex with more up-to-date integument and a more accurate skull and more accurate dentition would just be fantastic. And Alberto is just one of my favorite dinosaurs ever. So there's that. But I would also love to see, say, a Tarbosaurus or a Lythronax. Lythronax, I love the Collecte one, but I legitimately don't think it does, a great job at really capturing the unique skull structure of Lythronax. So it'd be cool to see Safari, take a stab at that genus. And it would also be probably pretty cool to see some more basal tyrannosauroids in there, like, say, Guanlong or Calescus or Proceratosaurus. So, yeah, I think that would be really cool. And if the Chiansaurus is setting a precedent for future theropods, then I'm excited to see more theropods, and Tyrannosaurs specifically. The final question from Dinoxels that I want to answer is kind of a weird one, just because I'm not sure why he's curious about this. Anyhow, it is, what figure you own has taken the longest to arrive at your house? I assume he means, of every figure I've ever ordered, which one took the longest to actually get shipped to me? The answer is, fairly boring. It was a package that I got not too long ago from Minizoo that had, the Collecte Fukisaurus and Thalassemedon, and also the, Eofauna Atlasaurus. Oh my gosh, what a model. Anyhow, not here to just praise the Atlasaurus. I could do that for an hour, though, if you wanted me to. Maybe that can be, the 10th episode special or something. I don't know. That's a silly idea. Anyhow, so this package, obviously Minizoo is based in Australia, and I ordered this, I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was very near, just the beginning of when the pandemic was really starting to hit hard in the US, and shipping was really already incredibly compromised. And so, it took, I think, close to a month, if I remember correctly, for that package to get here. And what was funny is that Aiden, Kikizilla 101, also ordered a package from Minizoo, the day before, I think. I don't remember what he got or what he was waiting for, but I think it might have been a BOTM Raptor and something else. But anyhow, so we were both constantly asking each other and messaging each other on Discord every time we were in call. It's have you gotten any updates? Have you gotten any updates? Do you know what's going on? Have you seen any updates on the tracking and stuff? And so we were both keeping up on it. We were getting so discouraged because it was taking so long. But eventually, both the packages arrived safe and sound, and so the story has a happy ending. So anyhow, that's that question. Very interesting one from Dinoxels, and I'm sorry that the answer isn't more exciting, but anyhow. The next question comes from First Name Last Name, very creative identity. They ask, what is so special about Eutyrannus in your opinion? I know it is one of your favorite dinosaurs, and then a bunch of other stuff, and okay. Anyhow, that's the core of their question. Eutyrannus, I mean, obviously, there is a certain amount of attractiveness to just, like, its body plan and the way it looks, the way it presumably operated ecologically, behaviorally. It's kind of just this perfect all-terrain vehicle of a theropod, somewhat similar to, you know, early carnosaurs and such. And, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's nice, but the main reason that I like it as much as I do, and that I just find it as interesting to the degree that I find it interesting, is because it's a legitimately very scientifically significant discovery. It's this large, like 30-some foot long, basal tyrannosaurid covered from head to toe, literally, in feathers. And it's not like, oh, it has quill knobs or a couple impressions. Like, no, it's like well-preserved impressions of feathers over the whole thing. It's like, okay, there it is. It was fluffy. We know. Like, it's just, it's plain to see. And, yeah, I mean, the implications that Eutyrannus has in terms of the integument and the feather distribution among theropods, coelurosaurs, and specifically tyrannosaurs, is quite fascinating, really. If it weren't for Tyrannosaurus having direct evidence of scaly integument on its body, I mean, Eutyrannus would essentially imply that, like, all tyrannosaurs that descended from it would have some sort of feathery integument or feather covering, at least to a minor extent, on their body. And T-Rex, of course, still could, but the fact that we have, you know, patches of scales from all over its body does somewhat suggest that it was predominantly scaled. But nonetheless, Eutyrannus still, you know, pretty much confirms that there would be at least some sort of feathering on most of the basal tyrannosaurids that are, you know, taxonomically close to Eutyrannus. And also just to perhaps tyrannosaurids that live in colder climates, like Eutyrannus, which of course lived in a climate that could actually be snowy, I believe, for certain parts of the year, which is pretty interesting. So yeah, there's just a whole lot of ramifications and implications related to its integument and what that implies for, you know, feather distribution across the greater taxonomy of Theropoda. The next question comes from Gabriel L., and he asks, if you could say there was a point where you started liking dinosaurs and figure collecting, what was it? Also, do you wish there were more pre-dinosaur figures? So I'll answer the second one first, because it's kind of a shorter answer. Short answer is yes. I absolutely would love to see more pre-dinosaur animals represented in model form. I would love to see just more Paleozoic stuff. And this reminds me, I found a cool little shop online. I think it was an Australian shop. I don't remember what it was called. If anyone is watching this, or listening to this rather, and they, like, recognize my description of this place, like, please let me know in the comments so other people can find it, and so I can find it again, because I've completely forgotten what it was called. But they had, like, a Dunkleosteus, all these cool, like, Carboniferous Devonian era kind of early tetrapods. Like, they had a cool Tiktaalik and stuff. They had a ton of, like, Cambrian invertebrates and things. They had, like, an Anomalocaris and a Hallucigenia and stuff. Opabinia and all those sorts of characters. And they were really cool. I was totally, like, ready to jump on it and get a ton of them, even though they were pretty pricey. But then I found in-hand photos, and I believe this company 3D prints all their stuff, and the 3D printing quality is just not up to the quality of the initial, like, sculpts in the promotional images. So sadly, I didn't get any of that, but you might be into it. I mean, it might not bother some people. There were just some weird, like, 3D printing kind of patterns, and some of the detail was a bit obscured. But it was really cool. It was really cool to see some of those more obscure, older, prehistoric animals represented in miniature form. And, yeah, I'm still somewhat interested in those. I might have to go take another look at some point. But to answer the other question of, like, when did I start to develop an interest in dinosaurs? When did I start collecting models? My interest developed, I have to imagine, quite early. Most of my main interests in life developed around age 2, according to my parents. And I think dinosaurs kind of came in slightly later. So I think it was around age 3, I'm going to guess. I know I already liked dinosaurs by age 4, because at age 4 in 2005, when the figure had just come out, I received a version 1 Carnegie Collection Oviraptor by Safari Ltd. From my aunt and uncle as a gift, because they had actually gone on a trip to Pittsburgh and actually visited the actual literal Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh and gotten this figure from the gift shop there. So pretty awesome that it came like fairly directly from the source of, you know, the museum that particular series of models is associated with. That's really cool. And even though at that time, you know, I was very young and probably was perfectly content playing with very cheap, just whatever plastic dinosaurs I could scrounge up, I think even at that time I must have somewhat realized that that Oviraptor was a little higher quality, like just the detail, the little fingers and the face and things. I accidentally hit the spacebar. Apparently that stops the recording. Anyhow, I think even at that age, I was somewhat able to determine that this was like a higher grade thing than most of the dinosaurs that I was playing with as a child at the time. And so it wasn't until a little later, though, that I evidently discovered what company actually made it. Maybe it was literally being able to read the text on the belly that did it, but at some point I figured out, I think around age 7, right after me and my family moved to my current town, that I started collecting pretty much exclusively at the time Carnegie Collection models. And I still remember the first few that I got after that Oviraptor. I got the green Allosaurus, that was like the later sculpt in the crazy pose, not the really old like swamp monster one. I got the Saltosaurus, I got the Stegosaurus with the 2007, I think it is, repaint with the green and the red plates. I think I got the Pteranodon fairly early. Looking back on it, I don't know why these were my choices out of the entire Carnegie collection. Even at that point in the, you know, like mid-aughts, I think there were way better models to choose, but whatever. You know, eventually I caught on, and now my collection contains pretty much all of the S-tier Carnegie figures you could ever want. So that's good. Eventually I actually developed good taste. But I remember, you know, I think, yeah, I ordered the first few as a kid at that time, like probably on Amazon or something, just on the internet. But I actually quickly discovered that in my town there is a little toy shop that sells Safari Ltd stuff. And I was over the moon. To find an actual local store that had Carnegie stuff was like just a revelation, because that was very uncommon. It's still pretty darn difficult to find like models by most of the companies that people in this community tend to collect from in stores. Some of them are more common. You know, you can of course find Terra stuff at Target. You can find Schleich stuff everywhere. But who wants those? Those are lame. I mean, Terra has some cool stuff, and Schleich has like 2 good figures, but you get the point. But yeah, so there's this local shop with Safari stuff. There's one shop way up in Seattle with Papo stuff. Those are like the 2 like rare cool finds that I've made over the years in terms of like actual local stores that have, you know, models that I would actually buy and add to the collection. So pretty cool, pretty cool. And yeah, the collection basically just sprouted from there for years. You know, I just continued collecting Carnegie stuff because as a kid, I was a closed-minded weirdo who could not accept the idea that any other company could be as good as Carnegie. But then I found that shop in Seattle and I discovered Papo and I got the Stegosaurus because I was like, wow, Papo's pretty cool. And then of course now I'm like basically usually a Papo hater, even though I love some of their stuff. And yeah, and then getting more into YouTube was kind of what prompted branching out and continuing collecting and taking it more seriously as, you know, an adult. And as an adult with a giant shelf of plastic dinosaurs, you know, I'm glad that I picked up the hobby. It is a lot of material stuff, and I can see how for some people it would seem like a silly pursuit, but there's something very soothing about curating a collection, even if it's a collection of plastic, you know, prehistoric life. And so anyhow, yeah, that is pretty much my whole answer to that. I've now gone on a whole life story. What is next? Okay, yeah, I found it. This is from the X-Man. What an epic name. He asks, if you could have any species of prehistoric life as a pet, what would it be? key component to the question here. Living requirements, not an issue. So basically, screw practicality. Yeah, if practicality wasn't an issue, I mean, if it was, you know, I'd probably have the usual boring answer of, like, just something small and easy to feed. But if it wasn't an issue, I've thought about this question a bit, and I've come up with the perfect thing. It's actually, it's a little bit cheating, because it's not just, like, one species. I would want a few animals, but my dream, you know, practicality is no object, prehistoric pet situation would be to have a giant aquarium with just all my favorite Mesozoic marine reptiles. I want a Temnodontosaurus, I want a Kronosaurus, I want non-reptile stuff as well. I want ammonites everywhere, and I want just cool fish, whatever. I love aquariums so much. I love the ocean and marine life so much. As time has gone on, I've slowly been shifting over to actually taking more of an interest in Mesozoic marine life as opposed to dinosaurs, which is kind of crazy, but there's really something about it, and the idea of having a Mesozoic aquarium is ridiculously cool to me, and deeply speaks to my inner 10-year-old. Alright, so I think we're getting kind of down to it on questions. The next one, okay, yeah, I've got a few questions here from Bermudasaurus 303. First of all, he asks, what's your opinion on Bullyland figures, and will you ever get any? Bullyland figures are kind of a dime a dozen. They're alright. They somewhat remind me of older Schleich stuff in terms of, like, their sculpting style. And, of course, that doesn't sound like much of a compliment, but some of them really are kind of okay. Nothing amazing. The only ones I would really consider getting are, I think this is a fairly obvious choice, but the Lambeosaurus. It's like the only decent Lambeosaurus around. And then also they have an ammonite that actually looks really cool. And I think possibly, like, maybe an Orthoceras and some other, like, marine invertebrates such as that. I don't quite remember, but I remember the ammonite specifically looking really cool. So that's my brief thoughts on Bullyland. His second question is, what's your opinion on the Collecte Majungasaurus? I had to look this one up. It's disgusting. It's clearly from the older, you know, Collecte days. Probably from when they were still called Procon, honestly. Although I'm not really sure. Yeah, it's really no good. It's just a very ugly, sad little figure, and that's about it. It was funny, when I was Googling images of it, I also got an image of the Vitae Majungasaurus, and even though I don't even really like that figure, compared to the Collecte one, it looks so good. And let's see, the third and final one from Bermudasaurus here is, what is your opinion... No, not what is your opinion. What is your favorite Tyrannosaur species? And that is Eutyrannus, and we already explained why earlier, so I won't go too in-depth. Let's see... yes, the New Master Dromeotheropod Club. Very catchy, very short name, just rolls right off the tongue. He asks, will you ever have kids, and will you try and get them really into dinosaurs and disown them if they don't like dinosaurs? I'm just going to answer the last part of that. Yes, I would disown them if they didn't like dinosaurs. Obviously, I am a man of principle. Next up, we have a question from Spino Dude. Actually, two questions. He says, do you like grass, and why am I cool? I do like grass, you know? I think grass is pretty clearly gotta be in the same, like, botanical family as, like, wheat and stuff. And wheat and other grains, you know, are responsible for some of my favorite food items. So I gotta give grass some credit, even though it can stain your clothing quite severely and do other bad things. You can like peel it apart and like whistle into it or whatever. Other people can. I don't know how that works. Grass is dope. Who doesn't love grass? And then, why are you cool? I mean, where do I even begin? Spino Dude is so cool. He is such a mega extreme Chad. He is like the review king. If you are not subscribed to Spino Dude, like, what are you even doing? Honestly. So anyhow, yeah. You get the point. Let's see, we got a few questions here from Adelans Productions. I almost said Atlantis Productions. That's not right at all. Let's see, he says... this is a good one. He has a few here, so I'm just gonna pick a couple. What are some of the most interesting conditions you have filmed in? That's a good question. I feel like most of the interesting filming conditions that I've had to deal with over the years of being on YouTube have mostly been a result of interesting locations that I have traveled to specifically to film, or in part to film. For one, hiking up to a ridgeline in the Cascade Mountains for the end of DI Season 4 definitely resulted in an interesting adventure. Not only were we way up in the mountains, but we were also running out of daylight, so that was a fun, adventurous, interesting shoot. Another one that comes to mind is going out to the ocean to shoot for the opening sequence of Season 5. That was a delightful trip. I love the ocean. I love the Pacific west coast of the US. That is like my favorite place to go. I actually just went on a trip there recently, and I'm currently posting a bunch of photos from it on Instagram, so you can go check that out if you feel so inclined. And yeah, I'm trying to think, I guess, working on Mind Dive has resulted in filming in some interesting, lighting conditions and stuff, because I'm using a lot more artificial light than I typically use, and, yeah, that's about the complete answer to that question. I don't have too much to say there, but that's a good question nonetheless. Oh my god. Okay, Adelance Productions, you are now my favorite person ever. Next question from him is, how did you come up with the name Spitfire Tree? Spitfire Tree is my solo music project. It is sort of an art rock / electronic rock / ambient electronic, whatever, esoteric experimental music project that I'm currently working on. There is a link to the YouTube channel for it on the little channel links on the banner for my channel for Bioniclesaurus, and also I link to it in the description of every single video on this channel, so you could go find it and go listen. I'm working on an album right now. The channel and the SoundCloud for Spitfire Tree are just soaked, bathed, positively marinated in just scraps and little pieces and programmed demos and a whole bunch of other crap, but hopefully you can get some enjoyment out of it. And if you hate it, that's fine, but it really means a lot to me to go check it out, because music is an incredibly important part of my existence, and I'm very happy to finally have a dedicated project to producing it. So anyhow, to answer the question and get the shameless plug over with, I came up with the name because of something we talked about earlier. The future is wild. Now, I want to look this up because I want to remember. The future is wild, Spitfire Tree. I want to say, yeah, the Spitfire Tree is a unique flowering plant from the Antarctic tropical rainforest 100 million AD in the documentary The Future is Wild. So I don't remember the specifics, and I don't want to research it here live, but the Spitfire Tree, if I remember, there's a Spitfire beetle and also a Spitfire bird, and there's a whole triple-sided, symbiotic relationship going on that is quite cool and quite interesting. And so I thought it was a cool, obscure reference, and also it's just a cool-sounding, catchy name, I think. So that's the answer to that question. And anyhow, What is, I lost the tab. Okay, I found the tab. I have too many tabs, it's a problem. Any other hobbies other than YouTube, music, paleontology, and music? Well, he mentioned music twice, but I do think that's appropriate because music is definitely number one. Listening to music, writing and producing music, that's where, probably a good 70 to 80% of all my artistic passion really lives. Music has always been a huge part of my life, and it's always been deeply important to me. But as far as other hobbies go, well, you're missing a big one, which is my animals. I want to make more videos about them. I've already made a few videos about them. I'd really love to slowly kind of shift this channel to also encompassing modern reptiles along with prehistoric ones, such as dinosaurs. And yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, my animals are 7 snakes and a lizard. And yeah, they're an incredibly important part of my life, a very time-consuming hobby at times, but I love them nonetheless. They're a crucial, incredible part of my daily routine, and yeah, there you go. Animals. Another deeply important part of my life that I have been passionate about for pretty much as long as I can remember. So yeah, there you go. And what were the other ones he said? Music and paleontology and, oh, YouTube. Duh. Yeah, the thing we're doing right now. Oh, and then his final question is, do you inhale oxygen atoms? I think so, but I'm not really sure. Okay, yeah, I found the last two. There's just two more to get through. First of all, Hajasaur838 asks, what do you think of certain dinosaur movies, such as Walking with Dinosaurs 2013? We'll start with that one. Walking with Dinosaurs 2013, this probably isn't the most unique opinion, but it's kind of a tragic mixed bag. Because on the one hand, some of the visuals are gorgeous. The Edmontosaurus herd emerging from the fog, the forest fire, just the design of the Gorgosaurus itself. Beautiful stuff. But it's plagued with this incredibly kid-oriented voiceover and narration that just will cringe you into an early grave. It's really sad because it has so much potential to be a really wonderful documentary, but they just clearly wanted to market it at a younger audience for some reason. And ergo, the final version of it is somewhat unwatchable. So yeah, kind of sucks, but there are some clips on YouTube of like versions with the voices taken out, and it really displays the potential that Walking with Dinosaurs 2013 had. Next up, we have March of the Dinosaurs. I love this one. I love March of the Dinosaurs. It actually has a very similar cast of creatures as Walking with 2013. You got Edmontosaurus, Pachyrhinosaurus, Gorgosaurus. This one also has Albertosaurus, and it has Troodon. And some other stuff that I may be forgetting. I think it has an Ankylosaur of some type. And I don't know what to say. I know that, like, March of the Dinosaurs is probably not, anyone's favorite dinosaur documentary, but it's really up there for me. There's something about the storytelling, the likable characters, while still keeping things relatively realistic, and also the visual style and kind of the atmosphere of it. I think it really captures an interesting, like, beautiful yet desolate kind of atmosphere or ambience to that Arctic environment. And I really like it. I don't even want to talk about it more because I don't want to spoil anything because there's some cool concepts. If you haven't seen it, this is one I highly, highly recommend. March of the Dinosaurs. Go check it out. It's awesome. It's Bioniclesaurus approved. The effects and the CG are pretty cool too. They haven't held up like 100% in all areas, but there's some cool, like the models in particular, when you see them close up, there's some great like detail work and such. I don't know what the next one he labeled is. It just says Dinosaur 2000. That could be so many things. Next one is Dinosaurs Alive. I've only seen this one once and I hated it. I don't even remember it that well. I just remember it being one of those things that is like way too pandering to specifically the people who are going to see it in IMAX where it's 3D, and then when you see it on a 2D screen, it looks terrible. I could be wrong. I was very young when I saw it. This might be a very unfair, bad take, but I do not remember enjoying Dinosaurs Alive whatsoever. And then the next one, the final one he has, is Dinosaur Island 2014. Haven't seen it, saw the trailers, the designs look like trash, there's people in it, I'm not interested. There's my take. And the final question is Kikizilla101 asks, pineapple on pizza? My answer is unequivocally yes. The Hawaiian, or more accurately Canadian-style pizza with ham and pineapple, I do like. I understand why some people don't. It seems very weird. It seems sacrilegious at best if you haven't had it, but I just like the flavor profile. Fight me. So anyhow, we are almost to an hour here, and especially because this is the second time I'm recording this, my voice is almost dead. But I'll take these last few minutes to just thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this. If you have feedback for this idea, this series, I normally have so much lead up to new things that I try on this channel. So much like, oh, what do you think if I did this? Or would you guys want to see this? Here's a trailer, here's a teaser, here's an announcement. And this one, I just kind of relatively out of the blue just released this video. And I'm really excited about that, so if you like that, maybe that's a good way to go in the future. When I have a good idea, just go for it and see how it plays out. It's always worth trying stuff. And sometimes if you get stuck on just thinking of ideas, you never actually try out the ideas. So anyhow, if you have any feedback, negative or positive, about audio quality, format, structure, ideas, suggestions for guests, anything, please leave those in the comments below. And you can also leave in the comments below questions that you would like answered, or even just straight up suggestions of topics for me to talk about. You could just say, hey, what are your thoughts on this, or talk about this? And, you know, if it's a good topic, that could totally be in the next episode, the official episode 1. And you can also, I made a community post asking for questions as well, so you can post there a question if you really want to answer it. You can post it in both places, and I'll like definitely see it. So anyhow, thank you so much for listening to the first ever episode of my podcast, The PastCast. I can't decide if it's going to be The PastCast or just PastCast. I think it's just going to be PastCast. Not that it particularly matters. But anyhow, yeah, thank you for listening, and I will see you all next time.